If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with your friends and family helps spread knowledge. And when we help others grow, we grow too. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive into the podcast. The birth of a false flag strategy. The drafting of Operation Northwoods. Behind closed doors in the Pentagon. General Lyman Lemnitzer and his Joint Chiefs of Staff gathered around polished tables in March 1962. The Cuban problem weighed heavy on their minds. Castro's communist government sat just 90 miles from American shores, and the failed Bay of Pigs invasion still stung like an open wound. What happened next would shake the foundations of American trust for decades to come. The military leaders began drafting something extraordinary. Not a battle plan for foreign soil, but a blueprint for deception against their own people. They called it Operation Northwoods, and its pages contained ideas that would make your blood run cold. The plan was simple in its horror. Stage fake terrorist attacks on American civilians. Blame Cuba. Watch public anger boil over. Then launch the invasion that politics had prevented. Picture this. Passenger planes hijacked in broad daylight. Innocent travelers terrorized, all while the real hijackers worked for the Pentagon. The documents spelled out every detail. American agents would board commercial flights, announce hijackings, then land safely at military bases while the world believed Cuban agents had struck again. But the flights were just the beginning. The generals wanted to sink ships filled with Cuban refugees fleeing to America. They would rescue some, let others drown, then point fingers at Castro's navy. American cities would face bombings from their own military, disguised as Cuban sabotage. Naval bases would burn under friendly fire, with Spanish-speaking soldiers leaving behind fake evidence. The most chilling part? They planned to kill Americans. Real people would die in these staged attacks. Soldiers, civilians, anyone who happened to be in the wrong place when the Pentagon needed casualties to sell their story. The documents talked about death tolls like weather reports, cold and matter-of-fact. Cold War paranoia had twisted military thinking into something unrecognizable. These weren't foreign enemies planning attacks on American soil. These were American generals, sworn to protect the nation, plotting against their own citizens. Each page revealed another layer of betrayal. Mock funerals for living agents. Fake casualty lists in newspapers. Television broadcasts showing manufactured evidence of Cuban guilt. The entire American media machine would become part of the lie. The plan sat ready, waiting for presidential approval. 45 pages of pure deception, stamped and signed by the highest military authorities in the land. What kind of government considers such things against its own people? Presidential rejection and military fallout. Kennedy's stand against Northwoods. The tension in the Oval Office was thick as General Lyman Lemnitzer laid the documents on President Kennedy's desk. March 1962. The Joint Chiefs had spent months crafting what they believed was a perfect solution to the Cuba problem. But as Kennedy's eyes moved across the pages, his expression grew darker with each paragraph. The young president set the papers down with deliberate slowness. His voice was quiet but firm when he spoke. "Gentlemen, this will never happen." The room fell silent. These were not the words the military leaders expected to hear. Kennedy's rejection was immediate and absolute. He would not approve fake terrorist attacks on American citizens. He would not authorize the shooting down of passenger planes or the bombing of Miami. The idea of deceiving the American people to justify war went against everything he believed about democracy. General Lemnitzer shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The other Joint Chiefs exchanged glances. They had presented what they saw as a necessary evil. Kennedy saw it as simply evil. The president's decision sent shockwaves through the Pentagon. Phone calls buzzed between offices. Meetings were held behind closed doors. The military brass had been certain their plan would receive approval. After all, the stakes in the Cold War had never been higher. But Kennedy stood firm. He believed in civilian control over the military. The Constitution made him the commander-in-chief, not the generals. This was not just about Cuba. This was about who really ran America. Defense Secretary Robert McNamara found himself caught in the middle. The Joint Chiefs pressured him to change Kennedy's mind. The president expected his complete loyalty. McNamara chose his side quickly. He backed Kennedy's decision without question. Within weeks, the fallout began. General Lemnitzer was quietly reassigned to NATO headquarters in Europe. Other supporters of the plan found their careers stalled. The message was clear. There would be consequences for proposing such schemes. The rejection of Operation Northwoods marked a turning point. It showed that even in the darkest days of the Cold War, some lines would not be crossed. Kennedy had drawn that line in permanent ink. But questions lingered in the shadows. What other plans existed in Pentagon filing cabinets? How many similar proposals had been discussed in secret meetings? The president's firm stand had stopped one dangerous idea. Yet everyone knew that fear and desperation could breed many more. The Cuba crisis was far from over. Operation Mongoose continued its covert activities, but now the military understood their limits. The president would not be their rubber stamp for deception and false flags. Secrecy, destruction and deception, suppression within the Pentagon. The paper should have disappeared forever. That was the plan. In the quiet halls of the Pentagon, something strange happened after President Kennedy said no to Operation Northwoods. The men who created these dark plans did not simply file them away. They began to make them vanish. Documents started disappearing from desks. Files that once sat in metal cabinets were suddenly gone. The same generals who had written detailed plans about fake attacks now worked just as hard to erase every trace of their work. But why destroy evidence if they believed their plan was right? The answer whispers of something deeper. These military leaders knew their ideas would shock the American people. They understood that Congress would ask hard questions, questions they did not want to answer. When lawmakers came asking about military operations, they heard carefully chosen words. The truth stayed locked away while officials spoke in circles. They talked about protecting national security and classified methods. They never mentioned plans to attack American citizens. Years passed. The Operation Northwoods files sank deeper into secret vaults. New generals took over. New presidents came and went. The dangerous plans became a ghost story that only a few people remembered. The system worked perfectly. Too perfectly. Most Americans lived their lives never knowing how close they came to being targets of their own military. The plan to bomb ships and blame Cuba remained buried under layers of classification stamps and security codes. But secrets have a way of fighting back. They push against their chains. They wait for cracks in the walls that hold them. In the 1990s, something shifted. New laws forced the government to release old documents. Citizens began demanding answers about past operations. The walls around classified files started to crack. Researchers dug through boxes of papers that had sat untouched for decades. They found hints of strange military plans. They discovered references to operations that sounded impossible. Then came the breakthrough. Hidden among thousands of boring reports, someone found the Operation Northwoods papers. The same documents that powerful men had tried to destroy were suddenly in the light. The truth hit like a thunderbolt. America's own military had planned to kill innocent people and blame another country. The plan had real names, real dates, and real signatures from trusted leaders. The revelation changed everything. It proved that the darkest conspiracy theories might actually be true. It showed that the gap between protection and deception could be dangerously thin. The buried secret was finally free, raising questions that still haunt us today. Unveiling the truth, declassification, and public revelation in the 1990s and 2000s. The morning of November 22, 1963, changed America forever. President Kennedy was gone. Questions followed that would haunt the nation for decades. What really happened in Dallas? Were there secrets the government wasn't telling? By the 1990s, those questions still burned in the minds of many Americans. The whispers grew louder. People demanded answers. They wanted to see what files the government kept hidden away in locked vaults. Something strange happened in 1992. Congress passed a law that would crack open doors that had stayed shut for 30 years. They called it the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act. The government had to release secret files about Kennedy's death. All of them. A special board was created to handle this massive task. 5 people were chosen to review millions of pages. They worked in quiet rooms, reading through boxes of documents that hadn't seen daylight since the Cold War. Their job was simple but enormous. Decide what the American people could finally know. The board members knew they held secrets in their hands. Some files contained names of spies. Others revealed operations so sensitive they could still cause harm. But many documents were simply old. The reasons for keeping them secret had vanished with time. In 1997, something remarkable happened. A researcher was going through newly released files when they found pages marked Top Secret. The words at the top made their heart race. Operation Northwoods. These weren't files about Kennedy's assassination. They were something else entirely. Something that showed how far some military leaders were willing to go during those tense Cold War years. The papers described plans that seemed impossible to believe. Word spread quickly among journalists and historians. Here was proof of something many had suspected but could never confirm. The military had actually written detailed plans for fake attacks on American citizens. They had typed up proposals to stage incidents that would justify war. The documents were real. The signatures were authentic. The letterhead was official Pentagon paper. There was no denying what these files revealed about the thinking inside America's highest military offices in 1962. News organizations picked up the story. Books were written. Documentaries were filmed. The phrase Operation Northwoods began appearing in conversations about government secrecy and military ethics. People started asking uncomfortable questions. If this plan existed, what other operations might be hidden in classified files? How many times had similar ideas been discussed in closed-door meetings? The release of these documents opened a window into a world most Americans never knew existed. The cat was out of the bag. Operation Northwoods was no longer a secret buried in government archives. Ripples of distrust. Operation Northwoods in conspiracy culture. The documents sat in darkness for 40 years. When they finally saw daylight in the early 2000s, they changed everything. Operation Northwoods was no longer a whispered rumor or wild theory. It was real. The government had actually written down plans to attack its own people. This revelation sent shockwaves through America. People who had dismissed conspiracy theories suddenly found themselves asking uncomfortable questions. If the military could plan fake attacks on civilians in 1962, what else might they have done? The seed of doubt, once planted, grew quickly. The timing couldn't have been worse for government credibility. Just months after the Northwoods papers became public, the September 11 attacks happened. Within hours, some people pointed to the old military documents as proof that governments stage attacks on their own citizens. The comparison was immediate and explosive. Kennedy's assassination took on new meaning, too. researchers began connecting dots that might not exist. If the Pentagon could plan to kill Americans in Miami, could someone have planned to kill the president in Dallas? The documented willingness to harm citizens gave weight to theories that had seemed impossible before. Online forums buzzed with activity. The Northwoods files became Exhibit A in countless arguments about government deception. Here was official proof that the unthinkable had been seriously considered. The papers showed letterheads, signatures, and detailed plans. This wasn't speculation anymore. But something important got lost in the excitement. The operation never happened. Kennedy said no, and that was the end of it. The system worked exactly as it should have. Yet this crucial detail often disappeared in heated discussions about government lies and cover-ups. The documents created a template for suspicious thinking. Every major event now faced scrutiny through the Northwoods lens. School shootings, terrorist attacks, and political scandals all drew comparisons to the old military plan. If they could think about faking Cuban attacks, skeptics argued, they could fake anything. Government officials found themselves in an impossible position. Denying involvement in tragic events only seemed to confirm suspicions. The more they insisted on telling the truth, the more some people believed they were lying. Northwoods had become a weapon against official narratives. The operation's legacy lives in this strange space between fact and fiction. The documents prove that shocking plans were once discussed in Pentagon meeting rooms. They also show that someone with authority stopped those plans from moving forward. Both truths matter, but only one usually gets remembered. Today, Northwoods serves as a bridge between documented history and wild speculation. Its real story offers important lessons about government oversight and democratic safeguards. Its mythical version feeds theories that may have little connection to reality.